Hi, everybody. Welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. I'm Jim. Thanks for joining me. Well, it's the day after the election, and I wanted to talk about, first of all, that I have broken out of my reading slump. It's like the fever broke last night. I finished a book, the Hesiod book I've been reading. I talked about in my last reading update. I'll have more to say about that on the next reading update, but I did finally finish that. I finished the Theogony and the Shield of Heracles. And I also read a little bit more of Finnegan's Wake, and I read a little bit more of the Octavia Butler novel Parable of the Sower. So all of a sudden, it's like the dam broke, and I was able to focus on reading again. So this got me into thinking, why was I in the slump? And I got a lot of nice feedback from viewers that I'd like to review. So you had some good advice or just good kind of like supportive words to say about that. So if you have been in a reading slump or you're currently in a reading slump, let me share some of this feedback I got. You can always go back to that video, the reading update, the most recent one, if you'd like to read the full comments. But one viewer, Nuala Faolin, I'm just going to use sort of abbreviated names from your handles on YouTube. They say, yeah, we all go through slumps sometimes. Doubt this is a genre that might interest you, but if I'm slumping, I tend to pick up quick, fast-paced romancy. I do usually read some of that or longer fantasy while reading classics too. So the idea there is to mix things up to keep the interest level up. And I agree with that. It's a good advice. I'm always trying to cross genres, even though my main wheelhouse would be like, I guess, classic fiction, if you want to call it that, or classic literature, classic nonfiction. But I do, read outside that zone. So, for example, the Octavia Butler is probably pretty close to being in the canon of sci-fi and fantasy, if not already. But, a relatively recent author. So, I'm reading her, for example. So, yeah, that's good advice. And I always have my finger in multiple books. Usually about 6 or 7 books are going like on the stove at the same time. Denise at Dobby Books, who has a very nice booktube channel, says, first of all, you have some pretty legit reasons for falling behind on the reading, and you're okay there, thanks. As far as pulling yourself out of a reading slump, what always works for me, she says, is middle grade books. They're easy reads. They do a good job of warming up my reading muscles. And she offers some suggestions. Inkheart by Cornelia Funk, or Funke. The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim, Nimh, by Robert C. O'Brien. And Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Thanks, Denise, for the suggestions. And yeah, I agree. Like, there's some middle grade books actually that we still have from when my daughter was reading at that age. And I think we have like the whole Redwall series by Brian Jacques. And I haven't read any of those. And that might be nice to pick up like the first in that series and see if it's like a good way to get the wheels rolling again. Libro Paradiso, who also has a wonderful booktube channel, says, I've never had a reading slump problem. I am envious, Libro. I'm always reading something that stimulates me to continue doing it. Sometimes in the mornings when I don't know what to read, I'll read an essay or short story. That's good advice. And he says, that is enough to provoke my thinking. I agree with all that. And I have been trying to read some shorter stuff. I'm currently reading Borges, and the other day I did manage to read another 1 or 2 stories. So I'm kind of making some more progress in there. So that's been helpful to me. And essays is a good idea too. I should read more essays, more long form essays. So I'm going to work on that. Book Ramble, who also has a very nice booktube channel that you should check out, says Borges is interesting. As to slumps, it's all natural. I agree. The words will wait, come back fresh, and all will be well. Thank you for that support. James Adams says, I recommend going on a vacation. You'll be fine when you return. And that is excellent advice. I could use a vacation. Thanks for that comment. Stret Medic says, reading slumps happen to everybody. Right now, I'm reading a Library of American edition of James Thurber. That's intriguing. You remind me that I have a slim mass market paperback volume of James Thurber that I picked up at a library sale, and that would be a perfect quick read for me. I think I might try to locate that and give that a shot. My dad was a big James Thurber fan too, so we have some other books by him. And I'm going to pronounce this name, Ametozerek, 3451, says, as book lovers and book readers, we tend to have the desire to read, finish, and move to the next treasure awaiting us. In doing so, we sometimes forget the main reason for reading, enjoying the process. Since you're doing so many other rewarding activities, I talked about like writing and music and, my freelance work, it's understandable that reading time will suffer. Choose what you fancy reading at any given time. Don't think about finishing, but the joy you are getting from your reading. And that comment really stuck with me. Like, let's just enjoy however much I read this day, even if it's just a page or two, or a short chapter, or a short story. Just immerse in that, read it as it goes along, and, it'll come back. And I agree with that. So thanks all to have commented, all of you who have commented so far on that. I appreciate that. I appreciate your suggestions and your advice. All good advice. All good advice. Thank you. But here's what finally dawned on me yesterday. And I realized that what's been occupying a lot of mind space, especially in the last couple of weeks, is, surprise, surprise, the U.S. presidential election. And I've done just a little bit of backstory here about this. I've very much tuned out the news media in recent years, but I think it might help to frame this if I just sort of go back in time a bit. So in 2016, when Trump won, I was not happy about that result, but it was a real shock to the system for a lot of people. And I was kind of glued to the news media all through that 4 years of his presidency, sort of following all the ups and downs, the roller coaster, just all the crap that was happening. And, at one level, all that attentiveness to the news was maybe I felt like a sense of like support, that there were other people who were concerned about the same things that I was, but it was very wearying. And then in that last year of his presidency, 2020, when the pandemic hit, we switched and we just started, kind of watching and reading like the wall-to-wall coverage of the pandemic, which was sort of terrifying, all the stuff that was happening with, when in the very early stages when things were really bad. I remember all those images of Italy, for instance, when they just didn't have enough hospital beds for people. People were like dying in the hallway, and, all over the world things were bad. And, we were kind of caught unprepared here in the United States. And then there was all this horrible politicization of mask wearing and vaccines, and that was just really, really bad news. And I remember at one point, and this was pretty early, it was probably like in the spring of 2020, I want to say like April maybe, both me and my wife, we just kind of hit the wall. Like, we were like, we can't keep watching this. It is too they call it doom scrolling, and you can doom watch. And we just basically went cold turkey, and we just turned off the cable news for good, and we haven't gone back since. And yes, I keep in touch with the news. Yes, occasionally I backslide and I, read. I don't watch the TV news, but I, either watch some YouTube or more likely sort of read, kind of stay up on, news and current affairs and news and analysis. But I've really, really dialed that back. And it's been that kind of went all the way up until that Biden presidential election. And then when he won, and then there was all that controversy and leading up to the January 6th, 2021 insurrection at the Capitol, even that, I limited a lot of my exposure to that. I remember watching it and just my jaw dropping and like, what country do I live in? Like, this looks like a banana republic. I don't know what the hell's going on. And I had to turn that off. But really, ever since then, we've been pretty much sort of tuned out from the fire hose of information and misinformation that's been out there. And that was coupled a lot with a very severe dialing back of social media activity. I was never big on Twitter, but I completely deactivated and removed my account. I went pretty quiet on Facebook and Instagram, and don't check those sites as often. I do check Facebook maybe a little bit more this year since I took the buyout and I kind of at home more now. It's like kind of a way to stay in touch with some people, but yeah, really, really changed my habits with that. Never got on Threads. Don't do any TikTok. Don't do any of that stuff. And my wife kind of the same deal. She does her art. We watch kind of like quality YouTube stuff, like our friendly booktubers, and also like art instruction videos and music related things. But it's our habits really changed, and it's been really good. So all this now comes around to the recent history where, because I live in a swing state, a battleground state, you could not get away from the onslaught of coverage, of advertisements, of text messaging, of mailers every day, getting, 2, 3, 4, 5 text messages. Even when you say stop to end, like they just keep coming in. They come in from other numbers. We got mailers from both sides. For a while in the summer there, we were getting like Trump mailers, and door knock canvassers. Like, how many canvassers came by? Only Democratic ones. I never saw a Republican one, but it was just kind of unavoidable. And then you turn on the TV, like we're watching the Phillies or the Flyers or the Eagles or the Sixers, like television ads, political ads, like all through that. And, you just couldn't get away from it. So, you get caught up in that, you get swept up in that. And I have to admit, the last couple of weeks, I've been paying a lot more attention to the political discourse, and really, in a sense, to just try to read the tea leaves and try to sort through, like, are the polls reliable? Like who's right, who's wrong? Like, where is this trending? I can't tell, and as a result, I didn't have as much reading time in the last couple of weeks. Things kind of like screeched to a halt. And what happened yesterday or last night, we voted. Like, that felt good. We voted in the morning. It was kind of a nice neighborly feel here. We're in a liberal bubble here in my town. But we weren't convinced, like, we kind of knew this was going to be close, and we weren't sure like what was going to happen. But as the returns started coming in later in the day, like I had my laptop open and I was following the NPR election returns, because they had a pretty good site that was constantly refreshing. And I was just following it. We were watching the Flyers, and I had a couple other web tabs open just to keep an eye on any kind of newsy updates or anything. So we weren't watching the cable news. I'll never watch those guys again. Like Steve Kornacki, what a clown that guy is. Like the magic maps on CNN. I'm done. I'm done with all that crap. I have been that way for a while. So yeah, we weren't kind of following that. But the results were kind of like, oh, this really is close. Like I thought maybe it wouldn't be close, but this is like pretty close. And sort of went to bed, and that was the end of that. And then I woke up this morning to the obvious news that, the other side had won the election. And that was, unfortunate from my point of view, to put it mildly. But I'm not here to like really share my hot takes on political analysis. I don't particularly enjoy it when other booktubers get too deep into that and try to score political points. That's not really what I'm so interested in. And who am I? I'm just a guy who reads books and writes and likes art and music and nature. Like I'm not a pundit. So but I was just kind of like, I felt bad and sad, and like I know a lot of other people are kind of just crushed by it, and it's sort of sad. But not sort of sad, it is sad. But anyway, like and I don't want to look on the bright side of life here, but as you're like hanging on the cross with Brian in the Monty Python movie. But the fact that it looks like the person who won the popular vote also won the Electoral College is a good thing, because it brings more closure to it. And I do not anticipate that the people on the losing side of this election are going to foment an insurrection on the U.S. Capitol and engage in all kinds of ridiculous conspiracy theories. I think they're bigger than that and better than that. And that might help at some level to provide some stability. But, with the person about to take office in office next year, all bets are off as to how that could go. Who knows? But I am committed to not following it in any kind of like way that I was doing the first time around. Like that's done. I keep thinking of Voltaire and Candide. I will be cultivating my garden. Okay. So I think what's needed at this time is some perspective. And I think also a lot about how this ties back not only to the fact that like this was like sort of stalling out my reading life, which to all of you out there is really not of much importance. It's important to me, but it's like a little slice of my life. But when the dam broke last night, something about the fact that like I knew the election was ending, and even though I wasn't sure what the outcome was last night, I just started reading again. It's like, oh, I don't have to like be reading the tea leaves anymore. Like, and I never learned anything anyway. Everything I read seemed to be inaccurate. So that's over. And then the floodgates open, and I could read again. I finished the Hesiod book, and I'm deep into the other stuff. So that is a major relief to me, just on that level. But it also got me thinking to maybe some of the problems that we're seeing in this country, and I can only speak for this country, but what's disturbed me for decades, just on a kind of cultural and educational level, is the fact that people don't seem to read much anymore. They don't read books. They don't think big thoughts. They're reading tweets by twits. They're reading hot takes. They are listening to misinformation and propaganda. They are only seeing things through their sort of narrow frame of reference. So lots of biased reporting on different sides of the political spectrum. Like, we don't seem to have a standard anymore for like what constitutes reality or truth. So that tells me that people aren't reading enough philosophy, they're not reading enough ethics, they're not reading enough literature, they're not reading and studying history to see, to be able to put things into context and to recognize that sometimes the past is prologue on how current events compare to older events. They don't have any kind of appreciation for human character and morality and virtue. So this has been kind of like in my opinion, like a sort of a creeping thing that's been like sort of seeping into the society and culture in our country, only speaking of our country, for decades. You might go back to like the kind of domination of right-wing media on the radio airways, for instance. And I remember when this just kind of started, it didn't used to be that way. But all of a sudden, that's all you heard on the radio was just this kind of like one perspective that was just heavily opinionated and biased. And, that extended into like cable television and all the rest of it. So something very toxic has been like going on where we just not getting reliable information. Journalistic standards have gone down the tubes. There's economic reasons for this. There's like political reasons for it. I've lost a lot of respect for journalism. You have like sort of changing habits, and coupled with the sort of news media that I think has kind of like been irresponsible and unethical in a big picture way for decades, you've got a crumbling educational system. Especially a crumbling public educational system, which seems to have lost its way. And, the point of this channel, one of the points of it is to kind of celebrate and cheerlead for great books and big ideas, and stuff that matters, stuff that's beautiful, stuff that's important, stuff it will enrich your life. And what I've seen is year by year an erosion of that, where it just doesn't, it's not even part of the curriculum, or it's much less of a part of the curriculum. Like this kind of attitude where it's real simple. Like we can just read some really great books that have stood the test of time, think about them, talk about them, write about them, and learn from them, and form our own opinions about them. And that helps us to understand our world and ourselves. And I just don't see those conversations happening enough. One reason I love BookTube is we've found a technology that gives us a channel to like have some of those conversations, and it's better than nothing. It's actually a really nice thing, maybe an improvement. But in the culture at large, I'm not really seeing, and in the educational systems, and this is not just primary, secondary schools, but colleges, universities, I just don't see it being a priority. And what we have now in our political culture is in some measure a result of that. It is a disaster. And, it is what it is. But, I think if we wanted to think more progressively about, solving some of the problems that we have and like turning things around in a more positive direction, we have to start, number one, reading more, taking that more seriously, making more time in our lives for that, contemplating more. I would include like meditating more in that. And if you're spiritually, religiously minded, praying more. And being like in your social life, kind of like finding ways to have those kinds of conversations with people where you're sort of celebrating reading and books and thinking about things and philosophy and sort of getting more involved and more immersed in it. And also trying to find ways to sort of promote that in our educational curriculum, like where we just kind of like, we have to get back on an even keel where these things start to matter and make more of a difference. And I actually feel like that there might be an opportunity to eventually, maybe when some of this stuff washes out, eventually there'll be an opportunity to come to the middle and find ways to sort of rebuild our educational standards and what we want to get out of things, and to maybe, here's what I want to say. If people read more great stuff, they would be more liberally educated. I'm thinking of Robert Maynard Hutchins, great conversation. A liberally educated person thinks more liberally about things. They're going to be much less prone to propaganda, to misinformation, to biased information. They're going to have a more balanced view of things, and they're going to grow up. They're going to grow up and have a more mature view of things. I'm not going to just think of things about through the lens of my identity or whatever. We're going to think more on a level of our shared humanity and what's best for us. Like, so that's me on my soapbox. But anyway, I wanted to do this video today just to kind of document sort of where my thinking's at on it, and just to say, like, the breaking news, the good news is I'm breaking out of my reading slump, but I'm also thinking about this bigger picture of like, this is one of the reasons why I want to do this channel, is to like put some good thoughts into the stream and sort of encourage people to, like, you know, up their game when it comes to their reading and their participation in the culture. Like, because right now it's like, you know, it's like I'm watching pro wrestling. It's, you know, and it's like, you know, it's kind of like gutter level discourse at this point, and it's all spectacle and it's madness. But, you know, I'm just going to be tending my garden. The sun came up today. Took the dog for a walk. Had a nice conversation with my wife, and life goes on. And you know, we just continue. We've marched forward. There's more important things in my life than what's going on at some kind of hyper media, you know, postmodern virtual simulacra land. Like, none of that really is a difference maker for me. And, you know, I just encourage people to, like, sort of buckle down and, you know, if you're on the winning side of a contest like this, be gracious in victory. And if you're on the other side, be gracious in defeat, you know. And I would really like to live in a civil society again. Maybe I'm fantasizing, but that would be nice. Anyway, if you've made it this long, thanks for listening to me. I'll get off the soapbox now. I promise, you know, politics will be only looked at in maybe a theoretical way or a historical way, or, you know, if we can draw some parallels to things that we're reading. But we're going to get back to reading good books now. Thanks for watching.